I smelled his blood before I found him, and my whole body went still with hunger for revenge. For 6 days I had chased a ghost through the tunnels of my own territory. 11 of my guards were dead, and every single one had fallen without landing a single blow on the human who killed them. I am Vess, Queen Mother of the Ashlight Hive, and I had sworn to end this human myself. My people called him a monster. My scouts, in their last breaths, called him the one who does not stop. I had built a picture of him in my mind, long before I ever saw his face, a picture of something cold and cruel, wearing the shape of a man. I found him instead kneeling in the nursery hollow, in the soft blue light where my youngest larvae sleep, with 3 of my children curled behind him, and his own blood soaking dark into the moss beneath his knees. For a moment, my mind refused to accept what my eyes were showing me. He had wedged his body into the narrow entrance of the hollow, the only way in or out, so that nothing could reach my children without passing through him first. His armor was cracked along the side, scorched and torn. A barbed limb from a tunnel scavenger was still buried in his leg, and he had not pulled it free, because pulling it free would have cost him 1 unguarded second, and he had clearly decided my children were not going to be left alone for even 1 unguarded second. 3 dead scavengers lay scattered around him, the kind of vicious little creatures that slip into broken tunnels during fighting, drawn by the smell of unprotected young. He had fought off 3 of these things to protect larvae that were not his own, while I had spent 6 days hunting him for the deaths of my guards. He looked up when my shadow fell across the light. I watched him understand, in an instant, exactly what I was and what I could do to him. I watched him choose not to move anyway. He did not reach for the weapon lying slack near his hand. He simply shifted his weight, just slightly, so that his wounded body stayed between me and the children. "They were screaming," he said. His voice was rough and tired. "I heard it through a collapsed tunnel. I didn't know whose nest this was. I didn't stop to ask whose side you were on before I came in." He coughed, and it clearly cost him something. Wasn't about to start asking now. I could have ended him right there. Nothing in him could have stopped me. Not the weapon, not whatever training had made him a legend among his own people and a nightmare among mine. He had nothing left to fight with. He had spent it all defending 3 larvae that belonged to a hive he was supposedly at war with. "You are the one who destroyed my guards," I said, my voice shaking with something that no longer felt like the anger I had carried for 6 days. 11 of my own. "Your guards were escorting soldiers toward a surface colony," he said. "Families were there. Children were there. Mine, not yours, but children all the same." He met my eyes without flinching, though I have since learned this is difficult for humans to do. "I stopped them before they reached the colony. I did not come down into your tunnels to hurt your people. I came down because I heard young ones crying in the dark, and where I come from, that is not a matter of sides. That is just what a person does." The larvae behind him stirred, drawn by the sound of our voices, and pressed their small blind faces against his broken armor, as if he were something safe, as if 6 days of hunting him had somehow taught them a truth I had not yet allowed myself to learn. "I have led the Ashlight Hive through 4 wars. I know the sound of a lie the way I know the smell of rot in an egg." There was no lie in him, only exhaustion and pain, and a strange, stubborn gentleness he had not bothered to hide, because he never expected a queen to be watching him show it. I lowered myself to the ground beside him, an act that seemed to unsettle him far more than any weapon I carried ever could. "I will tend to that wound," I said, "or my children will spend their whole lives mourning the fool who saved them." He almost laughed, and the laugh broke into another cough. "Understood," he said quietly. I called for my healers, and together we worked the barbed limb free from his leg, while he gritted his teeth and said nothing at all. My eldest daughter, still too young to leave the hollow alone, crawled forward and pressed herself against his side while the healers worked, as though she already understood something I was only beginning to grasp. He let her stay there. He even lifted one hand, carefully, and rested it against her back, the way a parent might comfort a frightened child. "You are not what my scouts described," I told him, once the wound was bound and the bleeding had slowed. "People rarely are," he said, "once you actually stop to look at them." I asked him his name, and he told me it was Aldrich. He had led the human forces stationed at the ridge above my territory for nearly a full season, he said, though I had never once seen his face until that hollow. He told me he had grown up on a world far from this one, in a house near water, with a sister who used to sing while she worked. He told me he had joined the fight not because he hated my kind, but because he had once watched a settlement of his own people burned by another hive entirely, one far crueler than mine, and he had sworn never to stand by and watch that happen again to anyone, human or otherwise. I told him of my own losses, of the Mother Queen before me, who had died defending this very hollow from raiders 2 generations past, of the 11 guards I had mourned every single night since his arrival in my tunnels, guards whose names I still remembered, whose families still waited for them to return. He listened to every word without interrupting, and when I finished, he lowered his head, not in fear, but in something closer to respect. "I am sorry for their deaths," he said. "I will carry that with me. But I would make the same choice again, if it meant stopping soldiers before they reached a colony full of children. I hope you understand that, even if you cannot forgive it." I did understand it. That was the strange, uncomfortable truth of it. I understood it completely, because I would have made the very same choice myself, had our positions been reversed. Word of what happened in the nursery hollow spread quickly through my hive, and then, somehow, through the human ridge above us as well. Within days, a young woman named Alira arrived at the entrance to my territory, unarmed, her hands raised, asking only to speak with the queen who had spared their commander instead of killing him. She told me she served beside Aldrich, that she had feared him dead for 6 days, that she had prepared herself to lead an assault on my hive to recover his body. Instead, she found him seated beside me in the great chamber, his legs still bound in careful wrapping, sharing a quiet meal made from foods neither of our peoples had ever offered the other before. What followed was not peace exactly, not at first. Old wounds do not close simply because 2 people choose kindness over cruelty. There were still soldiers on the ridge who did not trust me, and there were still members of my own hive who did not trust him. But something had shifted, something none of us could take back. A single act of protection, offered without any expectation of reward, had cracked open a war that neither side had known how to end on their own. Aldrich stayed in my territory until his leg healed fully, which took the better part of a season. During that time, my children grew used to his presence in a way that surprised even me. My eldest daughter learned to say his name properly, in her small, clumsy voice, and would search for him each evening when the tunnels dimmed for rest. He taught her, patiently, how to skip small stones across the underground pools, and she taught him, just as patiently, the old songs my hive uses to soothe the youngest larvae to sleep. When he finally returned to the ridge, it was not as an enemy slipping away under cover of darkness, but as something closer to family departing after a long visit. I walked with him to the edge of my territory myself, my eldest daughter riding on my back the entire way, refusing to be left behind for even that short distance. "I hunted you for 6 days," I told him, "at the border between our worlds, certain I understood exactly what kind of creature you were." "And what did you find instead?" he asked. "A man bleeding on his knees, protecting children who were not his own, because he could not imagine doing anything less." He smiled at that, tired but genuine, the same smile I had first seen in the blue light of the nursery hollow. "Where I come from," he said, "we call that just being decent. Nothing more heroic than that. I have fought true monsters in my long life, creatures without mercy, without hesitation, without any care for the young or the innocent. I know exactly what that shape looks like, in any species." He was never that shape, not for one single moment. And from that day forward, whenever my hive spoke of the human commander who had once hunted our tunnels, we did not speak of him as an enemy at all. We spoke of him as the guardian who knelt in our nursery, bleeding, and refused to move.